Hello everyone, I'm Sebastian Y and welcome to Principles of Macro. In this video we are going to develop a more comprehensive model of an open economy. This is going to continue right on from the last set of videos where we established a lot of the terms we're going to use here, so make sure you watch those first before going on. A couple of other things to mention before we get started is that we are not going to explicitly model the GDP today. We're going to take it as given that we take our capital stock, our total employment, plug them into our production function, and that's going to give us our real GDP, but we're not going to get into where those come from today. Second, we're going to take the price level as given and not explicitly model that either. So you can assume that we've gone through the money multiplier, set the money supply equal to the money demand, and found the price level, but we're not going to get into it here today. We're going to focus mainly on the parts of the economy that are directly impacted by the open economy. I'm also going to take a US-centric approach here. Of course, you could take the perspective of any country, but just for simplicity, when I say domestic, we're talking about the United States, where the currency is the US dollar. Today's discussion is going to focus on two different related markets in the open economy, the loanable funds market and the foreign currency exchange market. In previous videos, we have talked at length about the loanable funds market in a closed economy where total national saving must equal investment. But now that we have an open economy, total national saving must equal investment plus net capital outflow. Remember that how this works is that every time a person saves a dollar, they could either loan it out for domestic investment, that's part of I, or they could use that dollar to purchase a foreign asset like a stock or bond in another country, that's net capital outflow. We've already established that the investment curve is downward sloping, but now we're going to think about the net capital outflow. Net capital outflow is also downward sloping. The reason for this is that as US interest rates increase, the incentive to buy US bonds also increases. That's going to decrease the incentive to buy foreign bonds. So as R goes up, more people are buying US bonds and fewer people are buying foreign bonds, which decreases the US NCO. On the other hand, as US-based interest rates go down, there is a higher incentive to purchase foreign bonds instead, which will increase the NCO. Let's visualize this by drawing the NCO curve. Interest rate will be on the vertical axis, and net capital outflow will be on the horizontal axis. As we've already mentioned, the net capital outflow is going to be downward sloping. How NCO is going to differ from a lot of the other curves we've drawn is that it can go into the negatives. So I'm going to draw a zero line down the middle of this. If the interest rate is sufficiently high, NCO is going to be negative because more US assets are being purchased by foreigners than foreign assets are being purchased by Americans. And on the other hand, if the interest rate is sufficiently low, then more foreign assets are going to be purchased by Americans than American assets will be purchased by foreigners. Because NCO is going to have to be equal to net exports, this also means that on the right-hand side, we have a trade surplus, and on the left-hand side, we have a trade deficit. And it all depends on what the interest rate is. Now let's talk about how this relates back to the loanable funds market. I'm going to draw a graph for loanable funds to the left of our NCO curve. I'm going to draw them side by side like this because the interest rates are going to be consistent across both graphs, and we're going to have the quantity of loanable funds down there. The supply of loanable funds is still the left-hand side of this equation. It's the saving curve. Now previously, with a closed economy, there was no net capital outflow, and the demand curve was the investment curve. But now things have changed because we need to add the NCO onto the investment curve to get the total demand curve over in the loanable funds market. At interest rates above the interest rate where NCO is zero, NCO is going to subtract from investment, and at interest rates below that level, NCO is going to add to the investment to get our total demand for loanable funds. So I'm going to carry this interest rate all the way across to our loanable funds market, and that is going to be the pivot point of our investment curve. And so our new demand curve for loanable funds is going to look something like this. And that's going to be I plus NCO. Again, notice how this curve is to the right of I when NCO is positive, and it's to the left of I when NCO is negative, because it is the sum of I plus NCO. Once we've done that, we're going to find our equilibrium, which is where I plus NCO crosses over with saving, and then that is going to carry all the way over to our NCO graph, where in this particular example, we have a trade surplus because NCO is positive. And that is going to be the value of NCO. This right here is going to be our total national saving. And if you want to know what investment is, we can just solve for it with I equals S minus NCO. Now let's talk about the other market, the foreign currency exchange market. The foreign currency exchange market relates the real exchange rate of foreign goods for U.S. goods with the quantity of dollars exchanged for foreign currency. I'm going to draw this in a particular way where it is directly below the graph for net capital outflow. And the reason for that is that the horizontal axes are going to be consistent. The foreign currency exchange market rests on the equation NCO equals NX. NCO is going to be the supply of dollars exchanged, and NX is going to be the demand for dollars exchanged. Net capital outflow are the number of dollars supplied to purchase foreign assets, and dollars are going to be required to purchase American goods, and so NX is going to be the demand for dollars. So on the horizontal axis, I'm going to write quantity of dollars exchanged, and on the vertical axis, we're going to have the real exchange rate, which we're going to use a capital E for that to distinguish it from the lowercase e we used for the nominal exchange rate. Just like NCO, this can be positive or negative depending on the trade balance. And so I'm going to take that zero line and bring that all the way down here and mark that out. The supply in this market is simply equal to the net capital outflow. However, the net capital outflow was already determined in this graph up here based on the real interest rate. Since the real interest rate does not appear in the foreign currency exchange market, that means that net capital outflow is fixed at whatever was determined by the loanable funds market. So to draw the net capital outflow, I'm just going to draw a vertical line at the same spot where we found the NCO in the previous graph. Now, thinking about the demand in this market, the demand comes from the net exports. Remember what the real exchange rate tells us. When the real exchange rate is high, that means that American goods are expensive relative to other countries' goods. But when the real exchange rate is low, that means that American goods are cheap relative to foreign goods. When American goods are cheap, people will want to buy those, but when American goods are expensive, people are going to want to buy foreign goods. And so our demand curve for dollars for net exports is going to slope downward. And this is our final component to determining our exchange rate. Wherever our NCO curve crosses our NX curve, that's where our real exchange rate is going to be. That is to say, the real exchange rate will adjust until net exports equals NCO. Just like with the previous graph, if we end up to the left of the zero line, then we have a trade deficit, and if we end up to the right of the zero line, we have a trade surplus. In this example, we have a trade surplus. Once we have solved for the real exchange rate, capital E, we can then go on and use the equation E equals little e times P over P star, and if we know P and P star, then we can figure out the nominal exchange rate as well. This has been just an overview of the general ideas behind the equilibrium in an open economy. In the next video, we're going to go through some numerical examples.